Well, here we go, Tennessee fans, as maybe as somber of a win as you will ever be a part of, as, of course, Tennessee was in charge, beat Mississippi State, which is one of the worst teams in the SEC, perhaps one of the worst Power 5 teams in the SEC, nearly as bad as some of the low-level opponents that Tennessee played in September. But no question about it, as we'll have takeaways, turning points, report card, all in this program, as it's the last look brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. The news, without question, is Nico Iamaleava going to halftime and not coming back out onto the field. I do not want to play doctor here. We are awaiting word on what exactly has happened to Nico. I would imagine that he'll have further tests as well. I'm not a doctor, but the one hit that stood out to me is when he went down on his left shoulder, and it was reminiscent of many other players that I've covered which have resulted in some sort of a collarbone issue. If that's a fractured collarbone, he could be out for the remainder of the season. Dislocated, maybe it's 4 to 6 weeks. Again, though, he could very well be back against Georgia. We just don't know at this point, Caleb. It was not a good sign that he didn't come to the sideline and return to his teammates. And it reminded me of Eric Ainge against Notre Dame when Tennessee tried a Hail Mary from about their own 30, which was not the greatest call in the world. In this particular instance, there's nobody to blame. If Nico's out for an extended period of time, we've said that he has to run the football. Injuries are a part of football. So I know he's put a lot into this. I've been told about his emotions after the Oklahoma win and after the Arkansas loss, how much it means to him. So it's just a terribly tough situation, and we'll get your thoughts throughout the program. But Caleb, clearly Tennessee is probably not a college football championship contender without Nico Iamaleava. No offense to Gaston Moore, but I find it hard to believe they're a real threat if Nico's out any extended period of time.
No, we watched Gaston Moore in the second half, and we have to give credit to the running game with Dylan Sampson and what they were able to do, and Peyton Lewis later, but there's no way they can go that far with Gaston Moore at quarterback. He can't make certain throws. Now, he can hit the tight ends over the middle or on the out routes. We saw him do that. But those deep shots that are crucial to this offense, he just can't hit. And honestly, this is one of the most, if you're a Tennessee fan, I mean, if he's out for a long period of time, and, we haven't really, again, we're speculating. We don't know. But in terms of sickening feelings in Tennessee history, this is near the top. Because, Dave, I know it was against Mississippi State, but you saw the offense finally hit its groove in this first half, didn't you? Like, you really felt that this is exactly what you were expecting them to do from the start of the year. They finally were managing to do it. The confidence was there. The receivers were stepping up. Nico was hitting them in stride. He was making the big plays. And for that to end, if it does in an injury, like a collarbone injury, and then you have to bring in a quarterback that just can't make those other throws, I mean, I don't know of another more brutal, sickening injury in Tennessee history. Do you?
I've got one, actually. And Christine, we're not trying to put the cart before the horse. I appreciate that. And Caleb and I talked about not playing doctor when we came on. And I do not want to do that at all. I'm just telling you, based off covering football for 25 years, what it looked like to me. And I hope I'm wrong, because I have a lot of respect for the young man. I have a lot of respect for what these guys have done. And on a personal level, I like guys like Cooper Mays. So we're not going to speculate any further. We're going to keep our eye out and try to get news on that. And I could be totally 100% wrong, and I certainly hope I am. So, yes, we somewhat were putting the cart before the horse, but I would feel as if I were neglecting our listeners if I didn't share with you my thoughts, having covered football for 25 years. Caleb, that's just the first thing I thought. I've seen players leave the field too with that type of injury and not look injured, not wince in pain. And also, he's Polynesian. We've talked about this before. Those guys are tough as nails. So even if he was in pain, I could see him walking off and not wanting to admit it because not wanting to think about the potential for that. So I was writing a column on, and you brought this up, Caleb, how Nico and Tennessee would come out and play early because that's their game, is to get on top of people. And Dylan Sampson had another fumble. If not for that, they're all over state early. I was nitpicking in my column talking about the one overthrow pass. I believe it was to Brew McCoy, but Nico came back and answered that with the touchdown pass to a wide open Squirrel White. This felt like if 2022 was a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 offensively, it felt like Tennessee was about an 8.5 or 9, that they were that close to just clicking the whole way through. Did you read it like that in the first half?
That's exactly how I read it. And it's funny you said you had a column. I had one too. I was ready to roll on how the offense is there. It's connected just in time because now, as you guys know, because of what Ole Miss did this weekend, Tennessee has to beat Georgia next weekend. There's no, lose to Georgia and go 10-2 and the chips fall where they may. You're kind of in a situation where you have to beat Georgia now if you want safe positioning for the college football playoff. And I said that they were peaking just at the right time to do that. And the Nico injury happens. Now, when you say you don't know, you've got one of more sickening, were you going to say the Eric Ainge one was more sickening?
Oh, no. I'm glad you led me to that. Now this one I had a definitive answer because I've mentioned this before. With an ACL, when they do the ACL check and they say that it's injured, they're right 99% of the time. There's sometimes they'll say it's not an ACL injury and it can still be a torn ACL. But when you say it's injured, when it's a positive, as in negative prognosis, you're right 90% of the time. It was Chuck Webb when I was about 14 years old. And I remember being in my car or being in the car with my dad, and they announced, was it against Pacific, I believe?
Yep.
That
Pacific.
was the most sickening one because they went ahead and said right after the game that it was indeed an ACL injury. And back then, an ACL was it was almost the end of your career as an elite back. You just didn't come back from that injury and ever gain all of your ability and all of your speed and all of your explosiveness. And I still think that Chuck Webb is one of the most talented natural tailbacks I've ever seen. So that's the first thing I thought of, Caleb. And that goes back to, little Dave Hooker when he was a fan. He was wearing an orange shirt and not sitting in the press box. And I didn't go to a lot of games. We went to the affordable ones because we didn't have a lot of money. And that was one we went to. And I just remember the sickening feeling. But again, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's a bruise. Let's hope for that. And listen, I don't say this lightly because you're talking to somebody who's, dad had a very serious heart attack just a couple of months ago. So there are more pertinent things to pray for. But if you're the praying type, just because what this means to Nico, not because it's your favorite team or you grew up watching them, but I just pray that it's nothing serious to him. So we'll continue to monitor that, keep an eye on that. Yes, go ahead.
Let's be clear on this. You're right. I mean, you think that for any player in general, you never want to see players get hurt. I mean, I'd say that for any player of any team at any time. I felt that for Keenan Pewley, but also we cover Tennessee, but regardless of whether or not you cover Tennessee or you're a Tennessee fan, you don't like seeing the stars go down. I would say this about Carson Beck at Georgia, Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. I don't like seeing those players, and I think you're with me, Dave, on this.
No, I agree.
It's not good for the sport when those players go down that are the storylines of the sport, and that dictate what happens throughout the course of a season in a sport. And I think that makes it worse.
I want to do two things to handle this as fairly as we can. Okay. I want to offer this on this. If Tennessee does have to go to Georgia with Gaston Moore, what are their chances? What do you think the odds might be? Let's say I was told by a gambling expert, Tyler Wyatt, that it was 7.5, somewhere in there. If Nico's not in the game, how much does it change things? And then unsung, that's a great question. I'll get to that. Does Tennessee get punished in the playoffs? So is Tennessee a 10-point underdog at Georgia with Gaston Moore in there? I would have to think so.
I would too. Now, I ask you this, Dave, because you covered the Eric Ainge injury. And, Rick Clausen came in. And, yes, they lost to Notre Dame. But then Rick Clausen came in, and 2 weeks later, you were at the SEC title game, I assume. He put up a fight against Auburn, didn't he?
Yes.
And then he won MVP of the Cotton Bowl. Now, looking back, that was probably the worst thing that ever could have happened to Tennessee because of the 2005 season, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, do you think Tennessee is capable of doing that with the Gaston Moore, or do you think that this offense is so different from that team, which was more run-oriented, defense, offensive line play, that there's just no way they can do what they did with Rick Clausen without their quarterback?
Well, let's talk about that for a second. This team is built unlike 2022, to win with a great defense and a running game. So if they're without Nico whatsoever, I actually think they could go to Athens and still beat Georgia because their defense is that elite. I know that sounds insane. And now I will say this. Let's talk about how Tennessee should be number 5 when the college football poll comes out. They absolutely should. Good call, Kyle Beach, because Miami lost, and who else lost in front of them? Help me. I just wrote the call. Georgia lost. So you would think Tennessee would be number 5. Now, somebody else brought up a great point in the message board too, and that is, would Tennessee be punished by not having Nico? I think that happened in 2022 by not having Hendon Hooker. I will still argue that Tennessee would have made the college football playoff, and please hit the like and subscribe button if you're on board. We appreciate that. I would still make the argument that Tennessee would have made the college football playoff potentially with a close loss to South Carolina. And I think it would have been close if Hendon Hooker wouldn't have been hurt. And then I think much like John Higgins, who was a guard for Tennessee, was their best player. Tennessee was the 65th team on the board from a source I was told in the NCAA selection committee for basketball. Higgins was a big factor. So it's just like you mentioned, the star power. Yes, I think it would unfortunately and unfairly affect Tennessee at the end of the year if Nico's out for an extended period of time. I think it would look really poor for the college football playoff committee to knock them immediately after he was hurt and have them, let's say, stuck at 7 instead of moving up to 5. There's no reason that Tennessee shouldn't be number 5. Correct, Caleb?
Correct. And a lot of this is going to depend and hinge on how they play without Nico. So you bring up the John Higgins thing. Well, Dave, what happened with the John Higgins thing? He was academically ineligible. Again, we have to insist that it wasn't like he was lazy not going to class. He was taking way too many difficult classes at the time.
He took 400 level math classes because he wanted to be a teacher. His advisors told him repeatedly not to do so. So no, it's not that he was stupid, but he made a stupid decision.
Yeah, exactly. What happened in the SEC tournament without John Higgins? Tennessee got the break speed off them at Auburn. An Auburn team they had beaten earlier in the year, by the way, with John Higgins. Another example, Jordan Travis with Florida State last year. Florida State loses Jordan Travis. They look horrible against Florida, and they look horrible against Louisville. And everybody's out saying, that's just not the same team. Now, on the other side of this, Ohio State in 2014. Do you remember what happened with them, Dave? First year of the college football playoff?
No, and Charles, I want to tell you, no, we're not sure Nico's out next week. We don't know anything. We're still looking for that news. We're live as we speak. So no, we don't know. Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So what happened with Ohio State? The beginning of the year, Braxton Miller goes down. JT Barrett comes in, loses game 2, and then they go and win out and finish 11-1. On the last game of the year against Michigan, JT Barrett goes down for the season. Ohio State goes to play Wisconsin in the Big Ten title. Dave, this is the first year of the college football playoff. Ohio State is the number 6 team. And, there's only 4 teams at this time. With their third string quarterback, Cardale Jones, they go and beat Wisconsin 59-0. And that catapults them to the 4th seed, which they then use to beat Alabama in the first round and go win the national title against Oregon. I'm saying all this to say that the committee's not going to punish you for an injury. They're going to punish you for how you look after an injury. So they're going to gauge Tennessee based on, okay, they're not going to say, well, Nico Iamaleava's hurt, let's write him off. They're going to say, well, how do they look without Nico Iamaleava? And we know this because they gave Ohio State all the credit in the world. They said, you know what? You didn't have your top 2 quarterbacks, and you went and beat Wisconsin in the Big Ten title, and they vaulted Wisconsin over TCU and Baylor, who each had 1 loss to go to the college football playoff, and Ohio State won the national title.
Yeah, but what have we said before, Caleb? And we said this before. Neyland Stadium would get Tennessee an 8 seed over a 9 seed if they were right there, because they would want Tennessee in Neyland Stadium for a home game, especially with Nico Iamaleava and an exciting offense. So let's just say Penn State's 9, just for instance. Well, Penn State's got an okay home environment, and then politics get in play. The injury, if it is prolonged, definitely opens the door for you to get the big orange screw, for lack of a better term. I mean, that's what we used to call it when we'd get a lot of parking tickets on campus. Yeah, I mean, and they have a history of doing that back in 2022. I get the feeling sometimes that college football looks at Tennessee as a neat little thing that when it's good for the sport, but in the end, they don't have a lot of faith in Tennessee. And perhaps that's well-founded. We could have that argument. I don't believe in batter-ball syndrome, but this is a tough night to make that sell right now. The show is brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Last Look, brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. So, Caleb, set us up a poll question, if you don't mind, and then we'll get to our takeaways. I think I know the turning point, and it probably has to do more with the rest of the season than it does just this game, which, oh my, Mississippi State is horrible.
To visit cctis.com. The information you need is easy to access, and setting an appointment is as simple as clicking the tab. Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, and Eye Care Optical at cctis.com. Simply the best.
All right, Caleb, which direction do you want to go on a poll question without drawing too strong a conclusions and pretending we're doctors with Nico?
We'll go with this. How concerned are you without Nico Iamaleava? Extremely. This team depends on him. Not much defense and running can still carry them.
Okay.
How about that?
I could roll with that. I think there are 3 scenarios here. Either he's out for the year. That's one. Either it was purely precautionary because they knew they could handle State, which, let's be honest, that would not be a coaching move you would make back in the old days, but nowadays it wouldn't be the worst idea, would it, Caleb?
No, not at all.
State was so bad, if it's something that you thought you could get healed up over a week, maybe that's why they held him out. And then the other option is that if it's like a dislocated, and again, I am completely speculating. If it were to be a dislocated, let's say, collarbone, something along those lines, he could be back for the college football playoff based on my experience. Again, this is all speculation. Do not hold me to this. I'm just telling you what I've learned in a quarter century of covering football. So, all right, Caleb, now let's look at Tennessee and how they can make the SEC championship game. Because you and I could debate over whether or not you want to be in that game or not. I think there's advantages to being in that game. I think there's also advantages to not not being in that game and just going straight into the college football playoff.
Well, there's advantages to maybe being in the game and not winning the game.
Okay. So where is Tennessee in the SEC standings right now? Because as far as the college football playoff, you would factor this in. There are only 2 SEC teams now with 1 loss. So you would think if the final college football playoff for tomorrow, or when it's announced on Tuesday, the second version of it, they would be the second SEC team or the first SEC team that is ranked highest in the college football playoff. But SEC standings depend on SEC games. So help me work our way through this as all these standings on various websites update. Tennessee, if they beat Georgia, they're pretty much in the SEC championship game, right?
Yes. So there are 3 teams with only 1 SEC loss. Only 2 teams with just 1 loss. That would be Tennessee and Texas. But the Aggies, Texas A&M, while they have 2 losses, they only have 1 SEC loss.
Okay.
But they do play each other. So we're talking about Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Texas. There's still the path to chaos in the SEC. And
wait. Let me start with this. If Tennessee beats Georgia, are they in the SEC championship game?
That's not a guarantee.
Okay. Because they could still lose to Vanderbilt.
Because they still could lose to Vanderbilt, yeah.
Okay.
So right now, Tennessee is 5-1. Texas A&M's 5-1. Texas is 4-1. Alabama's about to go 4-2. Barring anything crazy as we speak, they're not going to lose to LSU, which, by the way, is good news for Tennessee. It's bittersweet because of the Nico injury and because of Ole Miss winning, but also there's Missouri hanging around at 3-2. And you can think what you want about Missouri as a team, but this is about the standings now. And you know this, Dave, the SEC just goes based on record. So, and has all these tiebreakers. They're not going to do eye tests for the 2 top teams for the SEC title. Talking about the path to the SEC title right now is borderline impossible, Dave, because Tennessee is, let's just say Vegas goes and gets what they predict is going to happen. Tennessee could very easily, it would be favored to lose to Georgia. Alabama's going to be favored to win out. Ole Miss is going to be favored to win out. Georgia's going to be favored to win out. Missouri is going to be favored to win out. And between Texas and Texas A&M, you now have one of those teams is bound to lose and finish with 2 losses. If the other one loses and has 2 losses, Dave, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams in the SEC finish 6-2 in SEC play. That's insane. And that's now likely. Vegas is calling for that.
No, it is. I'm not worried at all about Missouri, but we'll see. I mean, it still could happen. You're right. Stranger things.
Missouri, and as we speak, Missouri just took a 30-23 lead over Oklahoma with 30 seconds left. Yep. So unless you guys think Oklahoma's offense, which we've all seen this year, can score a touchdown in 30 seconds, spoiler alert, they can't. So I will make the bold pick now. In this, at the risk of this YouTube channel, this YouTube post being outdated, that Oklahoma doesn't score a touchdown in 30 seconds.
All right, good stuff. Now, we do have an update from Adam Sparks. Josh Heupel on Nico Iamaleava's injury. Anticipate will be ready for next week.
Huge.
Precautionary decision at halftime to sit him out. He'll be ready next Saturday.
That's a big win. That's insanely good.
Monstrously huge for Tennessee and good for him. I will say this. We've seen Josh Heupel play the injury game before, right? So you would be better off if Georgia thought that Nico was going to play. I'm not questioning him because this would be a just flat out lie. Whereas you've said before, anticipate Cooper Mays playing in this game, anticipate Lance Hurd, or the Florida game last year, you've said anticipate Lance Hurd being available in the Oklahoma game, and he didn't even make the trip. So I take that with a grain of salt, but I hope he's being 100% honest. And I'll back him on this too. Listen, 25 years ago with a 2-score lead, you would have never said take the starting quarterback out because you've got Georgia to get ready for. That would have been against every old school coaching credo in the world. But nowadays, it's pretty damn smart because Mississippi State was horrible. Tennessee knew they could handle them. And if you sat him out because you knew you could beat State and you wanted to get ready for Georgia, then I totally get it. And that's a very, very smart move and very, very big news for Tennessee, Caleb. So let's get to your takeaways right now. Takeaways from the game as, again, we're brought to you by Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Look at me. No contacts, no glasses. LASIK vision surgery did it for me. They're local doctors that can take care of you. Takeaways, Caleb?
Yeah, so we'll start with the standout one that we've just been talking about. Injuries is the biggest takeaway. So takeaways from the Tennessee-Mississippi State game, we're talking about 5 takeaways right now. The first one is injuries really stood out, and obviously Nico Iamaleava was the headliner. Tennessee did not bring him back in the second half after he completed 8 of 13 passes for 174 yards and 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. They didn't bring him back, but that's not the only injury they dealt with. As you know, Dave, Dylan Sampson went out for a good few drives. Mm-hmm. And there was a period where Tennessee was concerned that they would be without the Nico Dylan Sampson backfield for the rest of the year. But Dylan Sampson came back in the game. As we talk about this now, Josh Heupel says they expect Nico Iamaleava back against Georgia. So there should be no issues, but that obviously changed. Look, I'll just call it what it is. If Tennessee was fully healthy, they're probably beating Mississippi State 48-7,
easy
48-14.
Easy. Which, by the way, my pick was 48-9. But nevertheless, all right. So, what other takeaways do you have from this game, Caleb?
All right. So, my next takeaway: with Tennessee injured and the passing game wrecked, Gaston Moore really benefited from Mississippi State's inability to not commit penalties. I don't know if you watched, but there were about 4 pass interference penalties they had. None of those passes would have been complete, Dave. They picked up those penalties because they were trying to stop it from happening, and Gaston Moore would not have completed any of them. So Mississippi State bailed out Tennessee a lot after Tennessee's injuries because they're so undisciplined and so bad of a football team.
Mississippi State's bad. At one point, I don't know if you saw this, but they were resetting their formation, and 2 of the guys, it wasn't technically in motion because they weren't set, but they're switching sides and they ran into each other. I think I did see that. I've never seen that before. 2 guys essentially going in motion, running into each other. That's a bad football team. And Caleb, I know you're high on their coach, Levy, but you should have your team forming at a more disciplined level at this point in the season. I got big questions about that hire moving forward after seeing them for an entire game. All right, another takeaway. What do you got, Caleb?
Before you go further, I give coaches that inherit a mess like Levy that are offensive minded with high minded offenses. You always get a year. You get a full year for your offense to be totally terrible. You're allowed that.
That's fine. But they were just really, there were some poor fundamentals across the board. But nevertheless, all right. What's next? What's our next takeaway?
Our next one is, and this is kind of a direct shot at Dave, so I'll just say it. Dave owes Max Gilbert an apology. Dave should come here, guys. Dave, and we just saw this on the message board, and I did say place kicking returned. That's my nice way. My takeaway is that place kicking is fine for Tennessee. My savage way to say it is Dave should come on here right now and stand up and applaud Max Gilbert. So, Dave, I would ask you to do that.
I'll applaud Max Gilbert. He did a fantastic job. I never doubted him for a moment. I just would have.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I would have held an open competition. All right. What do you got next on your takeaways?
Max Gilbert nailed a 51-yard field goal. Okay. Dave just needs to admit he was wrong. Next one is, honestly, and I want to know where you lean on this, Dave, because I'm a little bit mixed. rush defense is kind of a mixed bag. I don't think Tennessee's defensive line did what it should have done to stop Devon Booth and Johnny Daniels in this game. However, at the same time, they did come away with 3 sacks. They did have 9 tackles for a loss, and 4 sacks. And Jason Jenkins had that strip sack. So I'll just ask you, do you lean more to, credit to them for the tackles for loss and sacks, or do you lean more they didn't stay home enough and they let too many big plays happen on the ground?
I thought Tennessee thought that they could get a good push with their front 4 and didn't bring pressure very often. And I thought that some holes opened up because, let's face it, this was like playing a middle schooler. So you're going to occasionally, take some swats. Like if you're playing backyard basketball with a middle school, you're going to take some swats and maybe look stupid every once in a while, but this is your chance to go eat. So I don't hold that against them. And I don't think that's going to be a problem moving forward when they know that their opponent is a little bit better. I'm not sure that every opponent or every Tennessee player knew who they were going to play this week as late as last week. All right. Who you got next, Caleb?
And as we say this, I just want to say that Missouri has officially beaten Oklahoma. Dave is very shocked, guys. Dave really thought Brent Venables was the offensive genius that could lead a game-winning drive.
Yes, always. I'm a huge Venables on offense guy.
Yes. He if Dave could start a program tomorrow, he would have Brent Venables as his offensive coordinator and Billy Napier as his head coach. So that's where we're going
very
with this.
Detail oriented. By the way, goings on in the SEC. In one case, you have the Florida head basketball coach that's accused of sexual assault, and then you have the Auburn basketball team that starts a fight on a plane and gets shut down by the FAA and forced to land in an emergency situation. What the world is going on with SEC basketball? All right, Caleb, what's your next takeaway?
All right, so my top one is fully healthy. Tennessee's offense fully came together. There's no way to look beyond that. Dylan Sampson was Dylan Sampson. I get he had another fumble. It, again, to me, was another fumble that wasn't his fault. It's the 3rd straight fumble where he's being held up when he's trying to go down, and it's stripped out.
Well, that was a perfect hat on the ball fumble, but it's always the ball.
That's right. Helmet on the ball, yeah.
Yeah, it's always the ball carrier's fault when you fumble. Sorry.
It's not. You sound like Denzel Washington of Remember the Titans, okay? So
I'm just sorry, it is.
So in Remember the Titans, Petey takes a toss and his blockers all miss, they all miss blocks, and then he gets hit and fumbles. And Denzel's like, "Why'd you fumble?" He's like, "My blockers are bad." He's like, "Your blockers ain't got nothing to do with you fumbling the football." That's your take. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah. See, what I'm saying is, I think for the most part, the offense was complete. Dylan Sampson had 150 yards rushing. Nico would have had 350 yards passing had he not gotten hurt.
He wouldn't have had that many yards because he would have gotten sat in the middle of the 3rd quarter. They were going to. And by the way, for those just tuning in, according to Josh Heupel, Nico was just held out of the second half for precautionary reasons and will be available next week. So hit like and subscribe if you're happy to hear that news. Give us a thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. All right, Caleb. Turning point in the game. I think actually the turning point, if I may say so, is the fact that Josh Heupel said Nico would be available next week, Caleb. That's after the game, but do you have a turning point during the game?
Yeah, I do. And you might be a little shocked by this one, but my turning point during the game was the Jason Jenkins strip sack.
Really?
And that was crucial because that happened after Tennessee punted on their opening drive of the second half, and they were up 20-7. Mississippi State has the ball. Now, as bad as they are defensively, I think, Dave, you would agree with what you saw with them offensively. They have talent offensively. They can be a threat. Is that fair to say? They're capable on offense.
Yes.
And you start to worry that, Nico's out. He's not returning. Mississippi State can make this a game in this moment. It would be 20-14 if they scored a touchdown here. And Jason Jenkins comes away with a strip sack, which sets up a Max Gilbert field goal at 51 yards that they hit to go 23-7. I'm not so sure how Tennessee psychologically handles this game if the strip sack doesn't happen right there.
My turning point is the first touchdown of the game, the Squirrel White touchdown. I think it was clear that Tennessee, they knew this team schematically because we know Levy and Hopple go way back. They were way better than this team. I saw that play and that Tennessee wasn't afraid to go forward on 2 4th downs early. One they didn't get. I felt like the sense was that Josh Heupel wasn't worried about this game whatsoever early on. So I know that's an early turning point. I didn't think it was a concern, and I got to see firsthand how bad Mississippi State was. All right, what's next?
Yep. Well, no, that is the turning point. That's the only turning point for me. So what's next is let's go to some torchbearers. What do you think?
All right, torchbearers, as we remind you, the last look presented by Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn.
To visit cctis.com. The information you need is easy to access, and setting an appointment is as simple as clicking the tab. Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, and Eye Care Optical at cctis.com. Simply the best.
All right, who are our torchbearers of the game, Caleb?
All right, so why don't we start with Dave's nemesis, who for some reason he just doesn't like. And I'm obviously talking about the one, the only Boo Carter.
I love Boo Carter.
Dave thinks he's a problem child, that it's going to cause some issues, called him the Brian Darden of this team.
No,
recently.
I said that they would have treated him if he had this type of attitude like the Brian Darden that they beat into submission back in 1990, whatever.
The only difference is Boo would have handled it well and would have recovered, whereas Brian Darden was mentally weak and walked out of the program. Is that fair?
Yep, pretty close. Listen, he's going to break a punt return for a touchdown at some point this year.
He is. And that interception was, he stayed on, what did I tell you earlier in the week? Kevin Coleman, they were going to try to go to the whole time. Boo Carter stayed on him like glue. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Did not let him get any separation whatsoever. This dude's a baller, guys. This dude is one of the few defensive backs. He's playing nickel. Dave, can I say this? And I don't know if you've covered people like this before, but I don't know many defensive backs who could literally play any position in the secondary elite, but I feel like Boo Carter could.
I think he's as versatile as Eric Berry. I don't think he's as good as Eric Berry, but Berry played in the NFL, strong safety, free safety, cornerback, and outside linebacker. I think Boo Carter could do that. Not quite at the same level as Eric Berry, but that's pretty rare versatility.
Okay, so how about this? Let's do a lesser level of Eric Berry. What about Jason Allen? Boo Carter's this Jason Allen. This team's Jason Allen.
Oh, I think Boo's way better than Jason.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I like Jason. I had an issue with Jason after the hip injury because I'd heard how bad that was. And I know he had a good NFL career, but I thought he lacked some explosiveness from that point forward. And I think that Boo Carter right now has all that explosiveness and he's more versatile. It depends what you want. If you're an NFL team and you just need a lockdown corner, you probably take Jason Allen if they're both on the board. If you want a guy that's a little more versatile, you probably take Boo Carter. But if I'm building a football team, I want all-around great athletes. So if I'm an NFL team, we're just using that as an example, I would take Boo Carter. If I could get 4 years in college out of Boo Carter or Jason Allen, both 100% healthy, I'd still go Boo Carter.
Look at Dave. After all of his hate for Boo Carter, he has totally come around.
Never had any hate for Boo Carter. All right, what's next on our Torchbearers?
All right, so next, this was really tough. I'm sticking on defense for a minute, but it came down to Bryson Easton or Jason Jenkins because, Dave, as you know, Bryson Easton had a heck of a night. He had 2 quarterback hurries, had a sack. Omar Norman Lott's in there too. He was in the backfield a lot, but forced fumbles matter. Big plays matter. Jason Jenkins, by definition, gets on the list because of that.
Nope, I can. That's a great one. I can go with that. Any other Torchbearers?
Well, yeah, we always do 5. Now we go to the offensive side. He had a fumble, but Dylan Sampson still was Dylan Sampson. And by the way, he had 150 yards, and he had that touchdown run in the second half, Dave. And this is what stands out to me about Dylan Sampson in the second half. They knew he was going to get the ball. They knew he was going to carry it. And
I can't give a guy who's fumbled 3 games in a row at a Torchbearer award.
You can't factor in the previous games. You
Okay, I
just
can't give
take
a
this
guy
team
that
in the
fumbled a torchbearer award.
I can.
If we did that last week, we shouldn't have done that. If we did that the week before, we shouldn't have done that.
I've done it every single time.
Well,
he's got 149 yards.
Sorry, you can't fumble the ball. I mean, your defense is too good. All you have to do as an offense is not turn the ball over, and you've got a 50-50 shot of winning the ball game, no matter if you're explosive or not. You can't turn the ball over.
Y'all know Dave has never been high on Dylan Sampson. He was the one who said Dylan Sampson couldn't start earlier in the year. I'm kidding. That was me. But, I'm going to project this on the Dave now. So
no, I'm a big Dylan Sampson guy, but you got to stop turning the ball over. And you got to give me this. It's got to be mental at this point, right?
No, I think it's just 3 type of plays for the running back. Any running back would fumble the ball.
Okay. The guy has too much pride for it not to be mental.
This isn't rest in peace Sean Taylor trying to field a punt from Dustin Colquitt that he fumbled, which, as you know, was one of the dumbest decisions in the history of football when Tennessee beat Miami 21 years ago.
Yep. All right, what do you got next as our torchbearer?
All right, couple more. Dante Thornton is a torchbearer. 3 catches, 104 yards, and a touchdown.
And we did mention he was also held out for the rest of the game with an injury. We don't know the extent of that.
He came back in, though, I thought, because he got a pass.
No, he was announced out of the game by ESPN's announcers at one
I think I got it mixed up. I think you're right. Okay. Either way, though, he played very well. We got to give Squirrel White credit. You and I both didn't think Squirrel White was equipped to play right now because of his injury, but he came in 3 catches for 63 yards. Brewer only had 2 catches for 12 yards, but honestly, he would have had more if he wasn't getting interfered with the whole time this game. But look, Dante Thornton was the star of the receivers.
I thought it was clear that Mississippi State was going to do that whole thing, and you've mentioned this before, where you just continue to interfere, and you can't call every single one of them because then the officials get made fun of, and it holds up the game. I thought there was a lot of interference calls on State that didn't get called. At least 4.
You know what it's like? You know what it reminds me of? In basketball, have you seen teams in the past do this, Dave, where they set moving screens all the time because they're like, they can't call every moving screen. Like, they're not going to do that on offense.
Right.
And, yeah, that's exactly what they did. My top torchbearer, Dave, you can call me crazy because he missed the second half, but I'm going Nico Iamaleava. I'm going Nico. The way he played in the first half was superb. And I think he helped really deliver that win for Tennessee. He kept the game in control. And I know it was a bad Mississippi State team, but look, he made some throws that are we at least back to saying Nico Iamaleava makes throws that no quarterback in the modern era of Tennessee football has ever been able to make.
Yeah, and I love what they did with him. They felt more confident with him on the dig route to Thornton. I thought that's a pass that needs to be there. And that's one of those deep zone busters that Tennessee should be calling more of. It's not the tunnel screen over and over and over.
No.
It's some slants, some dig routes over the middle. And I thought that ball was just absolutely money. Any other torchbearers for us, Caleb?
No, that's pretty much it. But I have to ask you this because you talk about that dig route. I've kind of been in a debate in my head over who could make more throws between Nico or Tyler Bray. Tyler Bray could not have made that dig route throw, could he, though? Or could he?
No, I don't want to disparage Tyler Bray's arm talent because there are other things to disparage him about. But I think he had elite arm talent, but I think Nico's is just a little bit better.
I think so, too. I think that's is there anybody
that's going to be? And for anybody that's thrown a football for any amount of time and been in bad shape and gotten in good shape, when you start throwing with your hips and more power and more, just 10 pounds more muscle that Nico's going to have next year, his arms are going to get a little bit better. I mean, if it's an A now, it's going to be an A+ next year. So yeah, I think his arm's better than Tyler right now at his best, and I think it'll only get a tweak better by next year.
And that's special because those are probably the 2 best arms you've ever covered at Tennessee, right? Like T. Martin had a good deep ball, but T. Martin didn't have like the perfect arm for
Casey
right?
threw a wobbler.
Yeah,
but it was very accurate, and he reminded me a lot of Troy Aikman in that he powered the ball through the wobble. Usually, you have to throw a good whip, a good spiral to get it accurate, but he powered it through. So he didn't throw the prettiest ball, but it was very accurate. And so
kind of a Peyton Manning.
Okay, well, Peyton was slightly before my time, but
That's true.
I would say the three best were Peyton, Tyler Bray, and Nico.
Yeah, I'd probably go there too.
But just in terms of pure arm talent, this sounds like heresy, but I would probably take Nico, Bray, then Manning, whose arm was very underrated and who had a stronger arm than Ryan Leaf. I was told by several sources at the combine and in their workouts. So the whole notion that Ryan Leaf had this cannon and that Manning had a pea shooter was just a very strange narrative that was thrown out there. And I think you saw that over time, that Manning did not lack for arm strength, correct?
No, I think that was a retroactive thing based on his time in Denver, because Peyton Manning did not have the arm strength in Denver. And he settled.
And not to belabor that point, but I was told by a friend of the family that at one point before he went to Europe and did the stem cell treatments that he couldn't even shake your hand. He couldn't even squeeze your hand with his throwing hand.
Just a quick aside. It's kind of like people think Michael Jordan had a great jump shot. Dave, you know this. Earlier, Michael Jordan did not have a great jump shot. He attacked the basket. He developed the jump shot later in his career as he got older and less athletic. That's kind of like Peyton Manning with the arm. People remember the later years, not to belabor the point, but yeah, no, look, I'll say this. I mean, I wouldn't have even put Peyton in my top three, though. I still would have said T. Martin had a better arm than Peyton Manning. I would have said, Hendon Hooker may have had a better arm than Peyton Manning, too.
Better deep ball arm.
But you're right. Overall, Nico's got the best of all the worlds that we're talking about.
Be sure to hit thumbs up on the way out. Make sure you're subscribed. We'll be with you at 10 a.m. on Monday. Go to Off the Hook Sports for the very latest. And we're going to get to the report card right now. Caleb, report card. Where do you have Tennessee's quarterback position? We'll start from the get.
So quarterback, I'm going to go A. Gaston Moore didn't do anything for me to criticize. Did he do anything for you to criticize? And the collective finished 13-21 for 212 yards and 2 touchdowns when you throw in Nico. So I'm going to go A for quarterback.
I go B+. I thought Gaston missed some balls. But anyway, it was good. Nico was definitely an A+-ish.
Yeah, he was.
Right. Running backs, fumble,
all right,
Dylan Sampson, but you still love him.
I do, but I will go B+ because a couple reasons. Dylan Sampson had 150 yards, but he did have a fumble. And Peyton Lewis only averaged 3 yards a carry and not scoring a touchdown on that 4th down in the first half. That's a bit of an indictment against Peyton Lewis. You got to kind of push forward and isn't that a type of play where if you're a running back and it's a goal line play, you got to win the battle on the line of scrimmage, right?
I don't think he has any feel for the game right now because of the way they haven't played him earlier. I mean, I think he's out there playing September football in November.
That's true. Tell me, does Travis Henry score right there?
Yes.
He gets in the end zone, right?
Yes. No question about it. Offensive line, was that the best play? Was that their best game against an SEC opponent?
Yeah, but I'm also going to knock them a little bit for that 4th down play I'm talking about. So I'm going to go B+. Because you got to get the push. You got to make it easy to walk into the end zone. And I'm high on Cooper and Andre Carrick. And by the way, Jackson Lampley was in the game. I don't know if you noticed that. And he got some pushes.
Yeah. Spraggins got hurt at one point, so he was out. All right. Defensive line. What do we got?
Defensive line. Y'all are going to hate me, but it's a B-. You can't allow for Mississippi State to run for 179 yards on you. The sacks, I give you credit for. You got 4 sacks. You forced a fumble. Dave, am I unfair, though, with the B- for a defensive line? Is that a little too harsh?
I think it's a little harsh. I would probably go B+.
Okay. All right. A little bit difficult.
Linebackers?
B. It's a B. Part of the allowing them to run the ball was a big issue, but Arian Carter did an amazing job dropping back in coverage. He made some big plays, some big pass breakups, and Jeremiah Thielander recovered that fumble that Jason Jenkins forced. So that pushes them up to a B. I actually thought they were closer to a C- though before that.
All right. Secondary?
Secondary is an A+. Secondary was amazing. I mean, honestly, and Boo Carter is a superstar. And we have to start having the conversation now if this is the best collective secondary in Tennessee football modern history.
Wow, we discussed that with a 98. I'd have to still go with that group. But now special teams, I thought was really good. Gilbert, as you mentioned, was perfect on his field goal attempts, including one from outside of 50 yards. Boo Carter, I don't know why he wasn't returning punts earlier, but he's going to eventually take one to the house. Is that an A?
Well, yeah. So kick returns is an A. Peyton Lewis, William Wright both had solid kick returns. Boo Carter, you're right. He averaged almost 10 yards of punt return. He had 6 punt returns, and he was a little risky with a couple of them, but it didn't matter. And then
all the good ones are risky with them. I'll defend him on that. That is true. Ones. I've seen Deion Sanders do some stupid things, and then he just might take it to the house. All right.
And place kicking is an A+++++++. And Dave owes Max Gilbert an apology on our show on Monday, guys. I'm going to make Dave call Max Gilbert personally and say, Max, I was wrong. Caleb was right. You are the greatest kicker I have ever witnessed.
I can do that. I can reach out to Max. I've got a good friend of the family, so we'll do that. We'll see if we can get Max on. All right, Caleb, does that do us for the report card?
The last one is play calling. Defensive play calling, A-. Head coaching overall, A+. Offensive play calling is a B. I thought they didn't air it out as much as they should have in the first half, believe it or not, even though they aired it out a lot.
I was comfortable with all that, so I would give coaching as a whole an A. And if they held out Nico to be ready for Georgia, I'd give it an A+++, because that's a deft move that goes against old coaching principles. Get him out there. You know, he's good enough to play, and it's still a 2-score game. What was it, 10 points at the time? So get him out there. Would have been the old school way of thinking, but that's not what the Vols did. So,
and tight ends get an A, by the way. Jeff Crumpley asked for tight ends. Tight ends get an A.
Yeah, they just weren't a big part of the game plan, as they didn't go to that 12 personnel because they didn't have to. So they were able to establish the run with their usual 3 wide receiver set. So he's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Last Look brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Enjoy life when you see better. They're local. They're phenomenal. Look at me. No contacts, no glasses. Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. CCTeyes.com. CCTeyes.com. We'll talk to you Monday at 10 a.m. Have a fantastic weekend. Go to offthehooksports.com for the latest on the Vols. But good news with Nico. As Josh Heupel reports, he'll be ready for next week, the big Georgia game. It's a monster, and that he was just held out for precautionary reasons. For Caleb